January 24th, 1945, Alsace, France. 2 days before Audie Murphy's stand at Holtzwihr, 30 miles away, a different company from the same division is being overrun. 6 German tanks, 600 infantry. They are moving fast across open ground, and the American line is breaking. One officer decides not to fall back with the rest. He is supposed to be in a hospital bed. He left the aid station against orders with a wound in his hip that hasn't healed to rejoin his unit. He grabs a telephone wire and runs 200 yards toward the German tanks. He sets up 30 yards from the German advance, and he starts calling in artillery on top of himself. The Army gave him 4 Silver Stars, 4 Bronze Stars, and 7 Purple Hearts during the war. They did not give him the Medal of Honor. That took 73 years, and he was already 20 years in the ground when it finally arrived. Garlin Conner was born November 27, 1919, in Tompkinsville, Kentucky, Monroe County, Hill Country. His family farmed tobacco. He grew up in the kind of place where a man's worth was measured by how much work he could do and how little he complained about it. He was not looking for a war. By 1941, he was 21 years old, working the land, living the life his father and grandfather had lived before him. The war found him anyway. He was assigned to the 3rd Infantry Division, the same division as Audie Murphy, the same division that had been fighting continuously since North Africa in 1943. By January 1945, Conner had already earned 4 Silver Stars and 4 Bronze Stars. He'd been wounded so many times, 7 Purple Hearts by the end, that his body was a running record of 2 years of combat. When he was wounded at the hip in January 1945 and sent to the aid station, his company was still in the field, still fighting. He lasted less than a day before he went back. What drove a man with that many wounds, on orders to rest, back into the worst of it, is not something the official record fully explains. What he did when he got there, however, is documented down to the yard. The German assault on the American position near Houssen began with armor, 6 tanks rolling in formation, with 600 infantry moving behind them. The objective was to punch through the American line and retake ground the Allies had spent weeks advancing across. Conner's company was directly in the path of it. The line was giving way. He took a spool of telephone wire, the kind used to run a field connection between a forward observer and a fire direction center, and he ran. 200 yards through ground being swept by machine gun fire and artillery. He was moving toward the German tanks, not away from them. He set up his position 30 yards from the advancing enemy. That is roughly the distance across a standard American living room, multiplied by 10. Close enough to hear the tank engines. Close enough that the artillery he was about to call in would land within danger close range of his own position. He got the fire direction center on the line and began calling coordinates. For hours he directed fire. When the field telephone line was cut by enemy fire, he repaired it and kept calling. When he was wounded again during the exchange, he kept calling. The artillery he directed broke the assault. Tanks stopped. Infantry fell back. The American line held. He had not been authorized to leave the aid station. He had not been ordered to take a forward position. He had simply looked at what was happening to his company and decided that what the Army's own records show about why this action took 73 years to receive its full recognition is a story that deserves to be told plainly. The Medal of Honor nomination process in World War II required witness statements, a formal chain of command endorsement and approval at the highest levels of Army command. It was a bureaucratic process running alongside a war that was killing men faster than paperwork could follow. Conner's nomination was submitted. Somewhere in that chain, between the 3rd Infantry Division's records, the Corps Command, and the review bodies above it, the paperwork stalled. The exact point at which it was lost, deprioritized, or set aside has never been fully documented in the public record. What is documented is this: Garlin Conner came home from the war. He went back to Monroe County, Kentucky. He went back to farming tobacco. He raised a family. He did not spend his life campaigning for recognition. He was not the kind of man who did. His wife, Pauline, was. For decades, Pauline Conner gathered documents, tracked down witnesses, wrote letters, and pushed the Army's review process to look again at what her husband had done near Houssen on January 24, 1945. She worked the bureaucracy that her husband refused to engage with because he didn't think what he'd done required a medal. The Army reviewed the case, then reviewed it again. The process required an act of Congress to waive the statutory time limit on Medal of Honor awards, a limit that exists precisely because the longer the gap, the harder verification becomes. Congress passed the waiver. The President signed it. But Garlin Conner had been dead for 20 years before anyone called his family with the news. On June 26, 2018, President Barack Obama, in one of his final Medal of Honor ceremonies, presented the decoration to Pauline Conner, Garlin's widow. She was in her 90s. She had been fighting for this moment for longer than most people spend on anything in their lives. Garlin Conner had died on August 27, 1998. He was 78 years old. He had lived 53 years after the war ended and never once received the country's highest military decoration for what he had done on that frozen field in France. What he did receive: the 4 silver stars, the 4 bronze stars, the 7 purple hearts, already made him one of the most decorated soldiers of the Second World War. He was in that company with Murphy, with other men whose names appear in the history books. His did not with any regularity. He went home to Kentucky and he farmed. Neighbors who knew him in the post-war decades have described a quiet man, not given to talking about the war, not interested in the attention that some veterans sought and others were given. The local VFW post, church, the land, the 3rd Infantry Division's record from January 1945 includes the action near Houssen. The after-action reports credit the artillery coordination with breaking the German assault. Conner's name is in those reports. His recommendation for the Medal of Honor is in the Army's records. It simply did not move forward in the way it should have, in the time it should have. 73 years is not a clerical delay. It is a systemic failure dressed up as paperwork. The medal that Pauline Conner accepted in 2018 was real. The citation was accurate. But there is something in the gap between what Garlin Conner did and when his country formally acknowledged it that has never been adequately explained. Garlin Conner is buried in Kentucky. He did not live to hold the Medal of Honor. He did not live to hear a president read his citation aloud. He did not live to have a room full of people stand up for what he had done on January 24, 1945. Pauline accepted the medal in his place. She had spent a significant portion of her married life making sure the Army did not forget what her husband had done. She succeeded. He never knew. The Army has a process for posthumous awards. It is used with some regularity. What it cannot do is give a man the moment, the handshake, the citation read to his face, the formal acknowledgement from his country that what he did mattered. Conner went AWOL from a hospital bed to save his company. He broke a German assault with a telephone wire and his own body as the forward position. He came home, said very little about it, and farmed tobacco in Kentucky until he died. The medal arrived 20 years too late. What Garlin Conner asked for was nothing. That is perhaps the most honest thing the record shows about who he was. Garlin Conner grew up farming tobacco in the hill country of Kentucky. He enlisted when the war came. He fought in North Africa, in Sicily, in Italy, in southern France. He was wounded 7 times. He went AWOL from a hospital bed because his company was still in the field. On January 24, 1945, he ran 200 yards towards 6 German tanks and held a telephone wire for hours until the assault broke. Then he went home. He farmed. He said very little. His wife spent decades making sure the record was corrected. The medal came in 2018. The citation was accurate. The ceremony was real. Garlin Conner had been in the ground for 20 years. Some debts cannot be repaid. They can only be acknowledged. Long after the man who was owed them is gone,